Alrighty, good evening, everyone. This is meteorologist Timmy Albertson here with you guys for tonight's weather chat. Well, we got ourselves some active weather going on, but relatively speaking, compared to what it has been the past couple of weeks, necessarily quite as active. As a matter of fact, the air mass that we're going to be seeing across a good portion of the U.S. is likely going to be a lot warmer than average, actually, probably quite a bit above average yet again here. So, we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to be tracking some rounds of rain showers moving up across parts of the Mississippi River Valley as well as the Ohio River Valley. So, let's go ahead and take a look on over at one of the places where we're at least seeing some active weather this evening. And that is going to be Louisiana, parts of Louisiana and eastern Texas. Let's take a look here, folks. We got ourselves kind of a nice little, more or less, line of heavy rain, but of course, naturally, some good lightning within it. At least that's being reported there. And this little, well, I guess not really little when you look at it. It's kind of a big blob of showers and thunderstorms. Is trying to track its way a little bit up towards the north and to the west. It's actually running right along a frontal boundary, which is kind of stalled out across this area. Now, this is all part of a setup that we're likely going to be seeing occurring over the next couple of days. So you do notice, depending upon your resolution, there are some flash flood warnings that are in effect again, as this is producing again. It's a very heavy rainfall, but it's not just going to be what's happening now, but it's also going to be what's going to be happening over the next couple of days. And that is we're going to be seeing a few rounds of low pressure moving up across this area all the way back into Ohio, and that's going to be producing some rounds of some rain showers there. So again, at least a little bit of thunderstorm activity for us there. Let's take a little bit of a look here back across parts of Ohio. They had a little bit of freezing rain this morning. There was some ice, but right now, for the most part, things a little bit quieter there. Temperatures, for the most part, are in the mid 30s across parts of northeastern Ohio. And going back into parts of Pennsylvania, looks like some of that colder air is still a little bit locked in place, especially once you head back into the mountains here of New York. And yes, as mentioned, they are staying in the way of some snow across that area right now, but eventually that too will transition over to some rain, as we talked about yesterday. So, let's go ahead and we'll take a look at our good friend, the surface weather map, shall we? All right, we always have to start off here with our surface weather map. So let's take a look here what's going on. Not really much. I mean, there is some movement going on here. In fact, we have that area of high pressure across parts of Quebec. This was the area of high pressure that was over here yesterday, back across parts of the Canadian prairies. It did not track south. It just decided it wanted to track east. And even taking a look at some of the temperatures, while this is a kind of a cold air mass here, temperature is only about 2 degrees below zero up near the St. Lawrence River, and only about 13 degrees below zero across parts of northern Quebec. So not necessarily the coldest air mass that we've seen across this area. Nonetheless, because that high pressure is moving away, we're not really seeing a lot of that colder air kind of advancing like we saw last week when we had that strong high pressure move down through. We really saw the imprint of it. This high pressure, again, has made its way over towards the east, so not necessarily the same areas. We also have kind of, again, this little scraggly frontal boundary that's just kind of sitting across parts of the Arklatex area. And again, that's helping to direct some of those rain showers here. But really, what we don't see much here is the really pronouncement here of a singular, pressure system, more or less. Not like what we've been seeing the past couple of days, or, last week we saw quite a few strong high pressures. And then the week before that, we saw quite a few strong low pressures. But this week, we're not necessarily seeing much of that, at least right now here on this weather map. So let's take a look here at the upper levels and kind of give us a little bit of an idea here of what's going on. So, we talked about last night some of the overrunning, but let's look a little bit higher up here and see kind of what's happening. Now, we do have a little bit of an upper level trough across parts of the across parts of the mountains there off to our west, going actually all the way back down into parts of Chihuahua, Mexico there. However, this is not a trough that is containing a lot in the way of colder air, at least in our area, that being the U.S. But what's also interesting about this guy is probably not going to be moving much over the next couple of days. And while that's kind of a big deal, this is actually going to help to kind of produce some little low pressures that are going to track their way up. And because this is not probably going to be moving much, we do see here with the way the upper level winds are positioned, you can kind of see it going from Texas all the way back up into Ohio. Again, that's going to be kind of the direction that we're going to be seeing these waves of low pressure moving along. Again, this right here tends to be an area where we see some upper level divergence in this part here of a trough. So it would make sense that this is where we're probably going to be seeing those little rounds of low pressures developing here. But this is not a very strong upper level trough. It is a trough nonetheless, and it's enough to kind of get some things going. But again, it doesn't have necessarily that colder air like what we saw with some of those systems that we were tracking past couple of weeks here. So let's kind of take a little bit of a look here. What I mean by this thing is not going to be moving much. So let's take a look here at this upper level trough. You can see it there right now on this particular model here. Just take a look. It's just kind of hanging out. It does kind of drift a little bit, but then we see this another little kind of quick, this shortwave trough kind of catch up. And overall, you just see they're kind of meandering around here. Not like that very strong signatures like what we were seeing the past couple of weeks. I'll spare you all the meteorological explanation for this tonight. I don't think we really want to go into all of this, but long story short, yes, it's a trough, but it's not a very strong one. So, with that said, immediately behind it is, of course, some upper level ridging. Now, let's take a look here at what this means at the surface. So what I mean by waves of low pressure. So you saw we have our trough generally kind of hanging out here. So let's take a look as we go through the overnight tonight. That shower and thunderstorm activity across northern Louisiana will probably drift a bit more to the north. We'll have our kind of our first wave of low pressure developing along that frontal boundary. And that area of low pressure, you can kind of see it there. This tracks its way up towards parts of Missouri and then ultimately into the lower part of the Great Lakes. Not a very strong one, but still nonetheless. Then we're going to see yet another little wave of low pressure developing as we go into the day tomorrow down across parts of Louisiana. That's going to bring in yet another round of some rain. And you can see that low pressure might be a little bit more defined just based on where the upper level patterns are going to be. But again, still not a very strong one. Now, this thing will try to push a little bit of a cold front through, but we still have that high pressure off the Atlantic coast there. So that front's not going to be able to really advance. And that front does not have a lot in the way of colder air either. So again, it's got quite a few things working against it. Regardless, we see here that it nonetheless will bring some more rain going back into parts of Ohio and the lower part of the Great Lakes. And then we could maybe see yet another round as we head into the end of the work week. Now, that one's looking like it'll probably track a little bit more to the south and to the east. But either way, kind of a rainy next couple of days across parts of Louisiana, going back into the Memphis area, as well as parts of the Ohio River Valley. So that's kind of the setup for this. Again, not necessarily boring, but again, we're running a bit above average here, folks, with these temperatures, and they're probably going to be staying that way as we go through the week here. So this is likely not going to be much of a snow event, but it could be a little bit of a rain event. Possibly, I wouldn't be surprised here if we did see some somewhat decent rainfall totals here over the course of the week here. This particular model likes to hint at maybe about upwards of 1.5 to maybe 2 inches of rain across some parts of southern Ohio, and then obviously a little bit more back down across parts of the deep south there. Now, again, this time of the year, we tend to see some active weather down across the deep south. But typically when we also talk about these low pressures in the wintertime, sometimes I like to talk about, when we get these strong low pressures, we can often see a wide array of weather. We can see blizzards on one side of it and severe weather on the other side of it. And there is going to be the kind of the possibility for maybe a few strong thunderstorms across parts of the deep south over the next couple of days, but it's not looking like it's going to be a major organized severe weather event. Again, part of the reason for that is, again, we don't really have some of that colder air to kind of help with that temperature contrast. And obviously that upper level system too is not necessarily the strongest. So even though there's going to be some rain activity, probably not going to be seeing too much in the way of strong thunderstorms with this, nor really going to be seeing too much in the way of, winter weather, I guess I should say. In fact, like I said, it's not looking very impressive. In fact, even if we pull up this kind of low resolution model here, you can see what I mean. How these temperatures, take a look here. They're not necessarily warm by some of your standards, but they're not very cold at all. You can see that colder air is just locked up across northern Canada, and there's nothing to bring it down into our region. So while the temperatures might be at least, in the 30s still across parts of the upper Midwest, that's above average for this time of the year. Not so much the highs, but the low temperatures too. Again, we're probably not going to be seeing those temperatures plummeting very much at night. Now, what this means here is that the predominant wind direction that we're also going to be seeing over this area, in fact, we'll flip up the winds here on this particular model, and you can see it's kind of a southerly wind across parts of the upper Midwest as those low pressures kind of track through. And it does shift a little bit, but again, we're not dealing with a, really big cold air mass here. And eventually, once we start seeing some of that upper level ridging kind of return, those winds are really going to be predominantly southwesterly. That could start to really eat away at some of the snow that's on the ground across parts of the upper Midwest. Now, I mentioned this last night a little bit here, and again, we won't go into the exact science behind it. Maybe we'll tomorrow, but that is kind of a big deal because you really need that snow. That snow on the ground really helps to prevent the ground or the ground from warming. It kind of reflects that sun's heat back up into the atmosphere. The air is not a good conductor of heat, by the way, so that's why we kind of rely upon the ground to do some of that stuff. But what I'm saying is that if we don't have the snow, we kind of lose that edge. And what that begins to result in is that there's not enough colder air in place. It makes it hard for that colder air to build in. Now, again, sometimes all you need is one snowstorm, and that'll be enough to kind of change things. But if you lose that snow, especially in the middle of winter, that's a problem. It's a problem because all of a sudden we now have these systems that would normally produce snow in one area, but because the temperatures are too warm, because we don't have a colder air mass in place, we don't have snow on the ground, it kind of spirals into this really weird what we call a feedback loop, more or less, at least for the winter time up in the upper parts of the Midwest. Much like why December was so warm, even though by a lot of standards for most people and across the US it was cold, but for up here, at least where I was, that was not very cold at all. As a matter of fact, we had very little snow, and that was very, very unusual. But because there was no snow, at least to start off with, it made it more difficult with each progressing system. And it wasn't until we got towards around the New Year's that we started actually seeing, snow regularly and enough to get on the ground. But now we run into the problem where we could start seeing it melting away. So, again, in weather, folks, a lot of things are connected. So, because there's not a lot of colder air in place, that's why we're seeing these systems struggle to really produce snow anywhere. It's been a very quiet winter. We had some lake effect snow obviously over the weekend across parts of the Great Lakes, but for the most part, it's been the past couple weeks have been somewhat wintry, but other than that, it's actually been pretty quiet. So we're probably, like I said, going to be seeing these above average temperatures across a good part of the eastern U.S. over not just this week, but possibly even going into next week. And we'll have to wait and see what happens after that. Maybe if we're lucky and some of that snow holds on, and along with some other things, if things kind of line up nicely, then perhaps we can get a little bit of a return. But it looks like for at least the remainder of the week and maybe even going into early next week, it's probably not going to be the case. All right, that's really about it for tonight. It's pretty much all we got to talk about here. And yeah, so with that in mind, everybody, we will go ahead. And I just realized, see, I had to do emergency work on my glasses earlier today, and I had glue, and I just realized I forgot to put the cap back on the glue, and so now there's glue all over the desk. That's going to be fun to clean up behind the scenes stuff. All right. All right, everyone. Well, I thank you all very much for taking the time to join me here on tonight's weather chat. We will go ahead and be back tomorrow evening, our usual time. We'll talk more about that rain. We'll see what else is going on. Let's just take one more quick look at Louisiana. Let's just see how their stuff's doing, because again, that's pretty much the majority of the activity right now. And still some flash flood warnings there. Let's take a look at our little thing. There you go. Pretty rainy there. All righty, everyone. Well, I hope you all have a good rest of your evening. We'll see you back here tomorrow evening. Until that time, keep enjoying that weather.